It's just natural that they would have such overwhelming affection for someone like John McCain. They actually, about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, spent a weekend at his ranch in Arizona drinking wine, swinging on tires hanging from his swing set. In 2004, many of the leading journalists in our country, anchors on network news, correspondents on cable news networks, went to various Manhattan restaurants, traveling around with McCain, celebrating his birthday, toasting him, singing songs to him. And there's so many examples that demonstrate how this affects the coverage. But the fact that his character is built up into this honor-bound man of principle, this heroic, strong, protective figure, is very consistent with how Republican and right-wing leaders are always built up, first by the right wing and then by the media. But it seeps into coverage even more. There was an example that was incredible. About 3 weeks ago, John McCain was traveling around the Middle East with his top Middle East advisor, Joe Lieberman. And on many occasions, 4 separate occasions at least, John McCain said, falsely, that Iran was importing al-Qaeda warriors into Iran, training them, and then sending them back into Iraq. That's something that not even people like Bill Kristol would claim to be the case. It's clearly false. And he finally was forced to retract it when, on the 4th occasion, Joe Lieberman whispered in his ear that it wasn't true. And yet the media virtually ignored that story completely, notwithstanding the fact that it means either that John McCain is completely ignorant about the most basic facts of the Middle East, the area that he claims to be a strong suit, or that he, more likely, is engaging in the type of deceit that the Bush administration has engaged in for the last 8 years, where they link whoever the enemy is of the week to al-Qaeda. They're training al-Qaeda. They're working with al-Qaeda. And many journalists, numerous journalists, when asked why they downplayed that story, said that because they know that John McCain is an expert in foreign affairs and because they know that he's honest, it can't possibly be the case that he was ignorant about what he was talking about, nor can it be the case that he was actively deceiving or intentionally misleading the public. It must have just been that it was sort of a negligible disconnect, a misspeaking incident between his brain and his mouth, and therefore it wasn't newsworthy. So the fact that they revere him personally and have an enormously high opinion of his character and integrity means that they won't see stories that reflect negatively on him as newsworthy, because by definition, stories that reflect negatively on John McCain's character or integrity must not really be news, and that's clearly what dictates the coverage.
This was that clip. I believe John McCain was in Jordan. He was standing with South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who had also gone on that trip, as well as Joseph Lieberman, who has been traveling with him in the United States and was also with him on the Middle East trip. This is what John McCain had to say.
Well, it's common knowledge and has been reported in the media that that al-Qaeda is going back into Iran and receiving training and are coming back into Iraq from Iran. That's well known, and it's unfortunate. So I believe that we are succeeding in Iraq. The situation is dramatically improved, but I also want to emphasize time and again, al-Qaeda is on the run, but they are not defeated.
You said that the Iranians were training al-Qaeda.
I'm sorry.
Training extremists.
I'm sorry. The Iranians are training extremists, not al-Qaeda. Not al-Qaeda. I'm sorry.
And for our radio listeners, that was Joseph Lieberman whispering in his ear and then John McCain correcting himself. Glenn Greenwald, you write about the Limbaugh Crystal Fox News right-wing faction that controls the political party, the Republican Party. What about the media?
Well, I mean, what media critics can describe how the media functions and point to all sorts of data and stories and narratives that we've been discussing today. But ultimately, often the most conclusive evidence of what the media is and how they function come from journalists themselves when they unintentionally reveal how it is that their profession operates. And to me, one of the most extraordinary and revealing statements came from a book called How to Win by two of the most establishment journalists in America, Mark Halperin, formerly of ABC News and now of Time Magazine, and John Harris, who is the national political director of the Washington Post and is now at the Politico. And they famously wrote a chapter entitled that examined the role that Matt Drudge plays in how our political coverage is shaped. And what they said was that Matt Drudge is the Walter Cronkite of our era, that there's no single individual who shapes media coverage, and especially election coverage, more than he does. And their motto was, Drudge rules our world, that media executives and producers and editors and the establishment press across the board obsessively check Drudge, because whatever stories he has are the narratives that will end up being predominating in the media. And the fact that Matt Drudge, who in the 1990s was considered such a low-life gossip that no establishment media outlet would even mention him or report on what he said, had not more than 10 years later become the single most influential figure in our political process, tells you much, if not almost everything, of what we need to know about how our political press functions. I mean, he's not just a gossip monger, although he is, and one completely unbound by considerations of truth and fact, although he is that too. He's a distinctly right-wing polemicist with a right-wing agenda. And so the idea that our establishment press, and since Halperin and Harris said it, many, many other establishment journalists and news executives have said the same thing, the fact that our press is sort of guided by a right-wing gossip monger tells you all you need to know about the content of our establishment press, the liberal media, and one need only look to the journalists themselves to describe how it is that they function, and one can see that that's the case.
Well, I want to thank you, Glenn Greenwald, for joining us. Glenn's new book is called Great American Hypocrites, Toppling the Big Myths of Republican Politics. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. We're broadcasting from Houston, Texas. We'll be back in a minute.
Who's afraid of the sun? Who would question the goodness of the mighty? We who banish the threat